Hi, Coram Deo Church. This is Pastor Brandon. This week, as we look at our one another commands, we are looking at 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 9, where Peter says, "Show hospitality to one another without grumbling." And I think as we look at this verse and try to live it out in our lives, I think there's two main things: hospitality and grumbling. And it's really important for us to be mindful of what the relationship in the early church was like. People are turning to Christ, receiving forgiveness, their lives are being transformed, but they're also experiencing this season of persecution within the early church. And so there are people who are being hurt, there's people who are mourning, there's people who are in great need, and there's a lot of persecution that the early church is dealing with. And in light of that, Peter is saying that there's this way that we as a church family are to relate with one another, is that we are to show hospitality to one another. And the hospitality that we are to show should not be with grumbling. And so what I think part of this is understanding what is hospitality and what does it look like to be hospitable and not grumble. And so hospitality, I think it starts with being generous, welcoming, and with one another, and also helping to meet each other's practical needs. And there's a reality in the early church, and even in our day and age now, is that there are Christians that are deprived of the necessities of life. And there's a reality that we are needed and we are needy. And there's this relationship within the church where God has designed the church body to care for one another and meet each other's needs. And this is a very practical, rubber hit the roads, daily living type of application in our lives where we show hospitality to one another. And I think that part of the implications of this is showing hospitality where there's legitimate needs for hospitality. It's really easy for us to call our friends over and have dinner and hang out and show hospitality when we really want to. But the rubber hits the road when there is a need, and it is probably would require that we sacrifice. It is probably not convenient, and I think this is the context where we work this out with one another, because it's really easy to be hospitable when we want to, but when it's not convenient, I think that's when we fight that temptation to grumble at the hospitality. Well, I'm doing it only because I'm supposed to, not because I want to. And Peter wants us to want to. He wants us to want to care for one another, meet one another's needs, build one another up, and ultimately love one another all the time. And so as we think about what it looks like to be generous, welcoming, and meeting each other's needs with hospitality, I think one place that we can start is looking at how Jesus did this. He was welcoming. He pursued people out. He exercised love and care for people. And we can think of all the different meals that he had with people where he acknowledged their personhood and acknowledged who they are and extended a relationship to them over a meal. But we also see, I think, more intimately hospitality with his disciples, that he was always looking out for their best interest, always giving himself fully to them, serving them, meeting their needs. And I think this, looking to Christ and how he was hospitable to one another, helps us understand better what it looks like for us to extend that same hospitality. And I think one practical way that we could start is be intentional to be generous, welcoming, and meet each other's needs. And sometimes that could be over the course of a meal. Sometimes that could be as you're exiting a grocery store. Sometimes it could we could exercise hospitality in our digital age. Think about what hospitality looks like on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. What does it look like to be generous and welcoming and meeting each other's needs in this new digital age of how we connect with one another? But I think it just starts with doing. And so intentionally reach out to somebody, develop a relationship, and look for an opportunity to be generous and welcoming. Some practical ways is this Sunday after church, go and meet someone new within the church body, and go out for a coffee, go out for lunch. Maybe pursue someone that is in a different season of life. If you're married with kids at home, pursue someone that's in a different season of life. Bring someone in who's younger than you, and invite them to a single guy or a single gal in the church to have a meal with you and be a part of your family. If you're in a different season of life, look to bless a young family within the church, whatever it might be. But start to put on Christ in this way where we are intentionally generous, welcoming, and practical to the cares and needs of one another within our church. And we're reminded in a very tangible way that all of us are needy and needed, and we've been given to one another as a means of grace within the local church. And so I encourage you, be hospitable, and be hospitable without grumbling, because God is using his people to care and bless for one another as we all grow together in Jesus Christ. See you this Sunday.